in programs for electronics and textile recycling, New Yorkers have a multitude of options to participate in waste reduction and recycling. Before we discuss the proposed swamp, I would like to emphasize again 2 points. First, the state DEC regulatory requirements have evolved significantly since 2006, notably requiring a 10-year planning period rather than a 20-year planning period. And secondly, that while the swamp provides a framework for diversion and efficient waste systems, the city can and must pursue specific programs that are not contemplated in the plan. This is by design a beginning rather than an end. Our record here speaks for itself. Neither universal curbside organics nor commercial waste zones were laid out in the 2006 swamp. And yet the city took historic action to move both policies forward in partnership with the City Council. This is particularly relevant to keep in mind as we discuss Swamp 26. Given DSNY's rich history of evolution, continuous improvement, and innovation, this lays the foundation for this next solid waste management plan that we are proud to put forth to guide future progress in waste reduction and resource recovery over the next decade. With over 24 billion pounds of waste generated by hundreds of thousands of businesses and millions of residents across the 5 boroughs every year, the 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan is a flexible framework focused on the areas with the greatest potential impact on our existing solid waste management system. Swamp 26 was designed to meet the regulatory requirements and guidance of DEC, and the program structure follows the stipulations for alternatives analysis that all planning units across the state must consider when developing a swamp. And this swamp was developed over the past 3 years, beginning with an extensive analysis of the current conditions for the solid waste management system here in New York City. The first 4 chapters of the plan documents in great deal who is generating how much of what materials, to the best of our knowledge, where they are going, and what the end-of-life options are for managing them. As a result of this data-driven analysis, and with input from best practices worldwide, the draft swamp includes 8 dedicated program areas designed to address the primary focus points needed to achieve continued progress in waste reduction, increased recycling, and a path to zero waste. These programs include waste prevention and reuse, organics diversion and recovery, residential recycling, residential municipal solid waste, commercial waste, construction and demolition waste, special waste, and education and outreach. For DSNY, this next swamp is the beginning of the next chapter in our journey, one that has become more inclusive, more expansive, and more effective. As outlined in the 126 initiatives supporting around 20 strategies underneath each program, we have goals and objectives that we will partner with many agencies, offices, and stakeholders to implement. The swamp is not a rigid blueprint for every possible action over the next decade. Rather, it provides strategic direction and guiding principles, as well as comfortably specific objectives. This enables the department and the city to continuously adapt our approach while in pursuit of our goals. It is a plan that lays the foundation for an ambitious future while providing flexibility that is necessary in our ever-changing world. At the same time, the swamp is not the only plan guiding DSNY's work, nor all solid waste management efforts throughout the city. And there are specific programs and initiatives that it does not contemplate, such as containerization, curbing illegal dumping, or collection operations. DSNY will continue to innovate and plan in those areas and intersect them with swamp programming as appropriate. We will also continue to support others in their journeys on waste reduction and resource recovery by serving as a technical expert, a resource for educational materials and programming, and a convener of collaborators in the circular economy. To talk specifically about a few key objectives contained in the swamp, organics remains a priority. Most importantly, continuing to increase participation and recovery rates. We plan to achieve this through a diverse combination of applied technology, diversification, and experimentation. For example, we will research alternatives to plastic liners for collection and investigate how we can leverage new equipment to better separate contamination from collected organics. Commercial waste zones are another priority and an additional focus that was not identified in the last swamp. DSNY has already committed to full implementation of the zones by 2027, and we are excited about the data quality and diversion improvements that will follow from this thoughtfully designed and rigorous contract-driven program. Finally, we know very well the responsibility of having a reliable, safe, and resilient system for solid waste export, yet we look to the future where the next generation of this requirement emerges. To get to that future, we have positioned the Waste Reduction Program as the first program, one that will enable recovery of value, reduction of impacts, increased benefits, and better environmental outcomes. This work is undoubtedly the most difficult work, and work that requires each and every one of us to steward the resources we consume. In that way, DSNY is serving as a leader, as this is a comprehensive plan for managing the waste of the entire city of New York. For that reason, the swamp includes programs and commitments that are outside of our agency's direct jurisdiction. However, we are proud to serve as the host for them under the umbrella of a more sustainable city. The future DSNY envisions is one where all the resources in the city are managed responsibly and to the best value. Whether it's advancing textile to textile recovery, turning food scraps from our diverse cuisine into biogas to support a clean energy transition, or developing new ways to reuse materials in future manufacturing industries, the Solid Waste Management Plan is designed to address the full breadth of materials management at a city as complex, diverse, and innovative as ours. Before moving to your questions, I would like to share details on the public outreach and engagement we have conducted as part of plan development. These statistics are not included in the plan, but are a testament to DSNY's desire to make the swamp a roadmap for all. We began formal outreach for the swamp last year, starting with city agencies that, in collaboration with DSNY, would have a major role in implementing Swamp 26. These agencies include NYCHA, Parks, DEP, Public Schools, DCAS, DOT, EDC, DDC, and the Mayor's Offices of Environmental Remediation and Climate Change and Environmental Justice. DSNY conducted 15 meetings with New York City agencies in 2024 and 2025. DSNY has also been an active participant on the Clean Construction Executive Order 23 Implementation Working Group and the Environmental Justice Interagency Working Group. These engagement efforts identified synergies between many planning efforts, including the State Swamp, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, Plan YC on Climate, and Food Forward NYC, as well as the EJNYC Plan, the New York City Industrial Plan, and the Urban Forest Plan, also under review. We have included many strategies that commit to this continued agency and office collaboration in the swamp. DSNY, after completing those engagement efforts, began outreach with elected officials, specifically this committee, and borough presidents. Since this spring, we have met with each of you or your staff and welcome you to share information about the proposed swamp framework with constituents and to solicit feedback. Additionally, DSNY met with the stakeholder groups, including the Solid Waste Advisory Board chairs, Town and Gowns Urban Resource Recovery Working Group, the Regional Planning Association, the New York City Climate Leadership Group, the EJ Advisory Board, and the Transform Don't Trash NYC Coalition. The comments received through these efforts have already shaped the draft plan. For example, a resiliency assessment of key export infrastructure was added after meeting with the citywide EJ Advisory Board. On October 27th of this year, DSNY held a virtual public meeting to share information on Swamp 26 and to respond to questions from the public. The meeting was recorded, and the recording and presentation are posted on DSNY's website. We also heard from advocates and from many of you a desire for more time to review the draft SWAMP and provide comments. In response to your request, DSNY was pleased to extend the public comment period an additional 60 days, now concluding on January 16th, as you mentioned, Chair, rather than the original public comment conclusion date of November 17th of this year. This more than doubles the legally required 45-day review time. Additionally, DSNY is grateful to the SWABs for hosting a series of listening sessions open to all residents and organizations to gather feedback that will be shared with DSNY and incorporated into the plan. We look forward to addressing all comments received, as well as relevant feedback from testimonies received today. Finally, unlike the 2006 SWAMP, no new physical infrastructure is proposed in SWAMP 26. Some may be proposed as part of implementation, and as discussed at the public meeting, there would be dedicated engagement around any specific facility, including requisite environmental reviews. This SWAMP will be implemented over a 10-year period, and DSNY will report on implementation every other year in biennial reports to DEC, which are posted on DSNY's website after their approval. While drafting the plan, DSNY identified the need for a minimum of 6 stakeholder focus groups and 19 strategies that will bring your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. We've also been joined by Council Members Marano and Nurse. Commissioner, in addition to what was said in your opening statement, what else was realized by the department regarding the 2006 SWAMP?
We are proud to say that we achieved a majority of the goals that were outlined in the 2006 Solid Waste Management Plan, similar to this plan that had a number of specific goals and objectives, and we have reported on them biennially in those DEC reports available on the website. So we've achieved many things, rolling out the comprehensive recycling program. We've advanced textiles, we've advanced e-waste, and then sort of at the tail end of that 20-year period, organics and commercial waste zones, as I discussed.
And what are some of the commitments made by the city in the 2006 SWAMP that were not realized? And what were the challenges that made this realization difficult?
There are a few that we note were not completed as planned. One would be a transfer station for recyclable, a marine transfer station for recyclable material out of Manhattan. And the second would be the use of the DSNY transfer stations for commercial waste. The first one that I mentioned, we actually, through our planning and current operations, have determined that we are not in need of an additional marine transfer station. Our current infrastructure network supports our needs in that way. And for the second, the use of the marine transfer stations for commercial waste, we have carried that over into the next SWAMP is something that we are going to continue to evaluate as the commercial waste zone program is fully rolled out.
Is that in reference? So the second part being the transfer station for commercial waste is what's being considered in the 2026 SWAMP.
It's in this current SWAMP.
Regarding
yes.
marine transfer stations, I understand that you're saying it wasn't something that was necessary from your perspective, but was there anything that was operationally challenging to bring on new marine transfer stations?
When we did construct the other marine transfer stations, certainly some of the difficulties with engineering design, construction, siting, the timelines for those types of things are always a challenge with infrastructure in New York City. So those would certainly be something that we'd have to consider when building any new solid waste infrastructure.
Has the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation ever expressed concerns that the city has failed or is close to failing to adhere to commitments made in the 2006 SWAMP?
No.
Has the SNY received communications from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation regarding the city's 2005 biennial update on the 2006 SWAMP?
Yes. So every 2 years, we submit our biennial report to DEC that demonstrates how we've complied with our last plan and gives a recap of tonnage and other information about our programs. And every time we submit one of those reports, we usually have a back and forth with DEC. They have some questions. We may make some revisions to the report, and then they'll issue us a final approval letter for that report, and that's when we post it on the website.
Can you describe those communications?
They generally ask for more information about a specific program, like, for example, with the food scrap drop-off program, they may ask us where all the drop-off points are, and we point to resources like the map on our website.
All right, now pivoting to the 2026 SWAMP draft. If implemented fully, will the waste reduction and diversion programs proposed in the draft SWAMP meet the goals established by the City Zero Waste Act, diverting 100% of recyclables and compostable waste from landfills incineration by 2030?
DSNY is very confident that if every New Yorker participates in the programs that we've put forth, we can achieve that goal. But it does require all of us to participate all the time.
So, if implemented fully, is it your belief that the waste reduction and diversion programs proposed in the draft SWAMP would meet the goals established by the City's Zero Waste Act?
Yes, it's my belief. I think it's also important to acknowledge, however, and we know this from our waste characterization studies, that a quarter of the material in our waste stream is not recoverable currently. So there's certainly work to do upstream, if you will, or in material design in order to really achieve the future I think we all hope for.
What funding does DSNY need to fully implement the waste reduction and equity programs outlined in the draft SWAMP?
Our plan going in is to do the best we can with the resources that we have. We are not requesting any formal new funding requests as part of this plan. However, as mentioned, if we do during implementation identify the need for new facilities, new programming, then we would put together a funding request specifically for that in support of implementing a certain strategy.
So you believe you have all the resources you would need to fully implement the waste reduction and equity programs outlined in the draft?
We do.
Is New York City planning to advocate for state funding via the Sustainable Futures Fund, an extender producer responsibility program, or the Cap and Invest program to help DSNY fulfill the goals of the SWAMP?
DSNY has a good track record of securing state funding, in particular in support of many of our programs. I know, for example, the special waste programs and our safe events are generally supplemented by state funding every year. And certainly we keep an eye on all of those opportunities and do submit applications whenever we meet the criteria. We were successful in a few federal funding awards, but of course those are not as available right now.
But at the moment, there is no anticipatory applications before the state regarding a request for funding. Are you anticipating any applications?
We apply for funding with the state every year, and so that's like an ongoing thing for us. So we always have an active application with them generally.
Okay. And are these applications, are you applying in order to come into compliance with the 2026 SWAMP plan, or this is just independent of that plan?
A lot of the work that we're applying for is related to things outlined in the 2026 SWAMP, so I would say it's related, but not specific, yeah.
Okay. What measures will the city use to hold itself accountable to its upcoming plan for managing solid waste through 2036?
So in addition to the biennial reports that we've spoken about a little bit, we, within DSNY, utilize data on an ongoing basis to monitor how our programs are doing, and we will continue to do that. So we'll check in more periodically than the biennial reports, certainly is just by virtue of our operations. For example, one of the things that my bureau is responsible for is paying all of our bills. So we see a lot of information about tonnage just in our routine work, and that helps us keep an eye on how we're doing with our programs.
To make it clear on the record, what is the latest date that DSNY is eligible to submit its draft SWAMP to New York State DEC for initial review?
So I'd like to answer that question in two ways. It's difficult to pinpoint a specific day on the calendar. However, there is a general requirement under DEC regulations that all actions such as this, including things like permit renewals, are submitted 180 days in advance of the expiration of the current coverage. And that's related to the State Administrative Procedures Act that provides you cover through administrative processes. That said, the regulations for solid waste management plans also include many variations on how to get to the endpoint, many of which include extended review timelines with DEC, back and forth 60-day review periods, 30-day response periods, et cetera. So from DSNY's perspective, to account for any of those scenarios, we believe that it needs to be submitted to DEC, at least the initial draft, by the end of January 2026.
What is DSNY doing to plan for the change in mayoral administration to ensure that individuals at the agency are oriented to the swamp and aligned on its priorities and values?
So DSNY is commencing engagement with the new administration to bring them up to speed on this plan and many of our other activities, and we look forward to engaging with the new council, new committee in support of that as well.
Can you describe the role of Inch and Meter, the engineering firm that was hired to assist in drafting the swamp?
Most certainly. So when I joined DSNY, it was to help prepare this plan, and that was about a little over 4 years ago. And we proceeded with our first step of issuing a competitive procurement, an MWBE solicitation for outside support, knowing that this was a discrete project that would require supplement to our normal staffing levels to get it done. So in that competitive procurement, Inch and Meter was selected as a minority women business to support this work.
What was the start date for Inch and Meter's work on the 2026 swamp?
So after we completed the procurement that I discussed, they commenced work late summer, early fall of 2022.
So about 4 years. They've been working on it for 4 years now?
3, yeah.
How much money has Inch and Meter been paid to date?
In sum, it's been about $1 million over those 3 years, so averaging about $300,000 a year.
Okay. How many virtual or in-person meetings or calls specifically pertaining to information or plans in the 2026 swamp did DSNY or Inch and Meter have with representatives of waste management?
As part of our work developing the base plan as well as the attachments and appendices, I don't know if you've looked at the entire format of the swamp, but we have some technical attachments that go into detail on certain things. And as part of that, Inch and Meter, in concert with DSNY, did survey the regional market players, but we didn't have any dedicated meetings to specific providers to develop the plan. We developed the plan.
Okay, so no meetings, right? Fair to say.
Yes.
And you wouldn't have the names of the waste management reps who worked on the plan because there were no meetings with them, right? So I can pass on that. Were there any virtual or in-person meetings with ReWorld? No, right?
Same response.
What are the names of reps and organizations in the New York City Compost Network who worked with DSNY or Inch and Meter on the 2026 swamp?
So we did meet with the SWAB chairs, as I mentioned. I do have their names here, at least the ones who joined us in a meeting about the swamp earlier this year.
Okay. How many times did those meetings?
Do you want me to read their names?
Yeah, if you could read their names, that would be great.
Okay. Mary Helen Sullivan from the Brooklyn Swab, Rhonda Kaiser from the Brooklyn Swab, Dior St. Hilaire from the Bronx Swab, Carolyn Busby from the Manhattan Swab, Matthew Savello from the Manhattan Swab, and we also invited Richard Nunez Lawrence from the Queens Swab. And we did also meet with the Transform Don't Trash coalition, as mentioned.
Our apologies for the sirens outside, everybody. There is a bill that would reduce the decibel levels that we need to move on emergency vehicles. How frequently was it like a one-off meeting, or were there multiple meetings?
There was one meeting for all the swab chairs, and then we did have a follow-up meeting as well.
Okay. All right. Now pivoting to public comments and public engagement and the process behind that. There has been major concern about the amount of public engagement the DSNY has done for this draft. After, a letter from the Comptroller's office, as well as Bar President Reynoso in our office, I'm grateful that the public comment period was extended to January, as you mentioned in your opening statement, but have still held only one public hearing, which is the minimum required by law. For a plan of this significance, we're digging down on why the outreach has been not as ideal as we would have liked, and what communities have not gotten the outreach they deserve, given the outsized impact waste management practices have on them and their neighbors. How many public meetings has DSNY held on the 2026 swamp where you have taken public comment?
So we held the public meeting on October 27th. And also, as I mentioned in my testimony, we did conduct extensive outreach, holding 33 meetings with city agencies, council members, and key stakeholder groups as part of getting that feedback. I also think it's important to note that DSNY approaches this planning exercise sort of as an ongoing part of our work. And certainly we take all sorts of feedback that we receive by virtue of everything from 311 comments to testimony at other hearings as part of the information we compile when working on a plan of this size.
But there hasn't been a public meeting where everyone can come in and testify or speak to what they would like to see in the plan. It seems more of meetings at a micro level, individual level, but not wide
We'd be
ranging.
certainly happy to work with council to set up something such as that.
And would you recommend for in your planning in the transition with Mayor-elect Mamdani's team, is the SNY also bringing attention for the need to establish more public meetings so that members of the public can testify?
That is something we can take under consideration. And again, we'd be happy to work with the council and Mamdani's team on whatever format they believe is best.
I know that the council and a lot of the stakeholders would really appreciate public meetings. Especially we want to reach people in the impacted neighborhoods that this plan is going to impact. To date, approximately how many individuals or entities have submitted a comment on DSNY's first draft of the 2026 swamp?
As of now, we have 18 formal comments. However, I don't think that equates necessarily to individuals. Some were made on behalf of organizations. I also think it's important to note that the comments are not necessary. We're counting a comment as a submission, and one submission may have multiple points raised or items that they're commenting on. But we've received 18 discrete packages, if you will.
Yeah, I think 18 is incredibly low. And I think it speaks to the need for having more of these public meetings. I think that's a testament to the need for that work to continue. What is DSNY's process for reviewing and considering public comments on the 2026 swamp draft?
Our process is to compile them all, and we will continue to do that until the public comment period closes in January. Then we will compile responses to each thematic area individually. This is very similar to how the state responded to comments on the statewide solid waste management plan. So, for example, if we receive multiple comments about one topic, we'll respond to the topic. We also plan to incorporate that as an additional appendix to the final draft plan, both the list of comments and responses. And then finally, we will obviously utilize the feedback to amend the draft plan. So we will make changes to the draft plan based on those comments.
What is your process for incorporating public comment from today's hearing and future hearings to revise your current draft swamp?
So basically, very similar to as I described, I would add that for programs, strategies, or initiatives that we receive comments on that intersect with another stakeholder agency, such as DEP, we will take any comments received back to them and ensure that they have the opportunity to, amend their proposals or take those comments into consideration as well.
Got it. Would today's comments from the public be incorporated in or at least inform the swamp?
Chair, as you mentioned, testimony received today does not sort of qualify as a formal comment, so we would encourage anyone who is providing testimony today to also submit a written comment, but certainly we have folks paying attention, taking notes as part of this exercise.
Great. Does DSNY plan to host any future public meetings regarding the 2026 swamp? You're saying you're looking into that. It would be great for there to be a schedule of briefings and of public engagement for 2026, especially before we enter the next stage. So as many as possible, and I'm sure that the folks who are going to be testifying today are going to make suggestions on what's needed, and we're looking forward to hearing that. And we hope that there's a robust public hearing, public schedule. And so we look forward to hearing from the members of the public on that. We learned that the budget for DSNY to conduct education and outreach about the swamp was cut significantly. Can you provide a number as to how much of those funds were cut? And can you also please describe the parties to which DSNY has done outreach with the present funding?
The funding for outreach and education at DSNY is not dedicated to the solid waste management plan. We specifically dedicated the funding for our consulting work to a lot of the technical information gathering, data analysis. Our overall outreach and education covers all of DSNY programming, including the solid waste management plan. So that's something that we've done internal outreach in order to ensure that staff at the department who are doing that type of outreach are up to speed on the details of the solid waste management plan, the public comment opportunities, et cetera. And Josh, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll just mention that when the initial sort of envisioning of SWAM 2026 took place about 4 years ago, at that time, it was not yet clear whether this swamp was going to include new infrastructure projects. There was a discussion of extensive environmental reviews, the possibility that community-specific outreach would be necessary. Once it became clear that this plan was not going to call for any new infrastructure, we were really able to right-size the outreach plan. And also just mention on that topic, we talked about the 18 public comments so far. As you know, the comment period's been extended significantly. There were, I believe, 82 people in attendance at that hearing. So I don't want you to think there were just 18 people there. There were 82 people at the meeting, and many did not feel the need to submit an individual comment, or at least not yet.
I mean, 18 people's in a city of 9 million residents, it's nothing.
We can head down anytime and ask people on the street, do you have a comment on the solid waste management?
I mean, that's the thing, is that most people don't know what it is. That's actually the problem, is that you can go up to anybody on the street and they don't know what the swamp is, right? There's only us nerds that know about it. So I think we need to do a little more on that. It was, other than the selection process for the vendor that you worked on with Inch and Meter, was there any funding put towards community outreach on this?
No dedicated funding. And in fact, the funding for the consulting work was actually, internally self-funded by DSNY.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask a few questions, and I'm going to let my colleagues ask questions. Will the department's timetable allow sufficient time for the council to fully engage in discussions with DSNY before the final draft plan is submitted to DEC?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. I hope that many of you continue on this committee so that we can pick up very early next year and continue our discussions about this plan so that we can meet our timeline.
Has DSNY reviewed the document titled A People Swamp, published by the Transform Don't Trash Coalition?
Yes, we have.
If so, which of their recommendations did DSNY hope to incorporate in its next draft of the 2026 swamp prior to submitting the draft for state review?
We were very grateful and pleasantly maybe not surprised, but we were glad to see a lot that was in the People's Swamp was also included in our draft. We align on many of the program areas and objectives, including commercial waste zones, support for EPR around packaging, expanding textiles and electronics, and of course, food and organics recovery. So some good alignment there.
Aside from the alignments, what are some things that were included in the Transform Don't Trash's plan that was not included in the original draft by DSNY?
We did review it and found a couple points that maybe weren't as aligned. One we've already spoken about today, and that is commercial use of the city's infrastructure for solid waste transfer, which we are continuing to include in the next solid waste management plan, as well as a more accelerated rollout of the commercial waste zone program than we've committed to.
A People's Swamp recommends that the city extend e-waste recycling programs such as eCycle NYC and textile waste recycling programs such as Refashion NYC to all residential buildings with 10 or more units. Has DSNY considered this, and if so, what obstacles have previously prevented the city from implementing this type of expansion, and how can the city navigate around those?
This is certainly something we've considered. We allude to it in the plan. It's difficult to commit to sort of full citywide expansion of those programs because we are a massive entity. And over the time that we've been working on these programs, we've been working to grow the industry alongside with us so that we are able to service more and more buildings and more residents. And Director Kitchener may want to add something there.
Yeah, I was just going to add that those programs are already available to all buildings over 10 units. So it's really just, it's a voluntary program. So we really just need all of your help getting the word out to let building owners know that they can join.
Are there any challenges to mandating this citywide?
I'll just say that we'd have to study capacity. If it's something that it's obviously above all of our pay grade as a policy decision. If it's something the council is interested in pursuing, we'd be happy to look at the feasibility from a capacity standpoint.
I think it's well within your pay grade, my friend.
To say whether it's right or not to do it, that's all you. That's all you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'm going to let my colleagues ask questions. And we have a lot of questions to get through. The topic areas are going to be waste export, waste incineration, commercial waste, constructions and demolition, recycling, metal, glass, plastic, and paper, co-digestion, organic waste. So we're going to get through a lot, but I'm going to have my colleagues, if they want to ask some questions under that topic area, you can go feel free as well. So I'm going to first start with, and I also like to recognize we've been joined by council members Ung and Banks. And to start with questions, I'll start with Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you all. Thank you for being here to testify about this. I want to start a little bit with process that the Chair was asking about earlier. I second all of his comments from earlier in the hearing. And I think that at a minimum, public hearings would have to take place physically in each borough in order for this to be a really thorough public review process. And I agree that 18 number is well below what I think it should be, even given that there was one public hearing so far. And I want to ask, so you indicated the public comment has been extended to January 16th, but you're also looking ideally, or I think in view of the state law, to submit something to DEC by the end of that same month. So, about 2 weeks later. So is there really sufficient time to grapple with all of the comments, engage with the council, and then submit something in that period and have a meaningful review of what the public says?
It is quite an aggressive timeline. We acknowledge that. We are also in discussions internally about the best way to meet that deadline with all those competing priorities and demands. One thing I will say is that we have a working relationship with DEC, and we are the largest planning unit in the state. And our plan is very lengthy, I think, as others may have noted. So approaching DEC with a draft, perhaps in advance of a final version, might allow a parallel pathway in order to meet our timeline. So those are the types of things we're considering.
Understood. Thank you. So in terms of the prior swamp, the 2006 swamp, folks at that time were grappling with the legacy of Fresh Kills landfill, the environmental justice aspect, the borough equity aspect. And one of the things that was produced by that swamp was the notion that each borough takes care of its own trash. Is that something that is being preserved in the current draft, or would be, or if not, incorporated into a modified draft next year?
Yes, that is included. We are proposing no changes to the trash, the municipal solid waste borough by borough plan of both transfer capacity and eventual export out of the city.
Okay, that's great to hear. In that vein, right, currently, Staten Island is taking a significant share of the organics collection, and that was not, as you said, an anticipated part of the 2006 swamp, but I'm assuming that you're tackling it very much so in the current draft. What are the plans for distributing the organics collection by borough in the way that you do for solid waste?
Sure. As part of DSNY's preparation for the citywide program, we did another competitive procurement. This time it was a bid for transfer and processing capacity for organics. We issued that in 2023, and we awarded 8 contracts in 2024. As of now, only 5 of those 8 facilities have been activated due to DEC permitting. So our plan is much similar to the MSW plan to have a diverse network of transfer stations around the city to allow for each borough, each operating area to have a dedicated space for organics transfer. It may not be where all the processing takes place, but that's the same for municipal solid waste. We use transfer to move to larger processing infrastructure. And so we're continuing that model with organics. It's not quite there yet as we are waiting for some permitting, but certainly taking the same distributive and resilient approach for that waste stream.
Sure. So I want to return to one of my favorite topics, which is electronics recycling. As you know, Staten Island had a curbside program, and that program was ended a couple of years ago. And I want to know what what does the swamp envision for electronic waste pickup? Is it going to continue to be e-cycle for larger multifamily dwellings and everyone else has to do drop-offs? Or is there a contemplation of making what was the pilot for Staten Island citywide?
We are certainly contemplating alternatives to the programs that exist today that you describe, either the large building or the drop-off model. We're considering pickups at smaller buildings, similar to the curbside program, maybe not exactly the same. Obviously, a single-family service is very high level of service and very high cost. So we're balancing that desire with funding through programs such as EPR, which does exist for some electronics, but not all, and it starts to get pretty complicated about what is covered and what has funding. So that's something we're going to continue to navigate under the new plan. And that's why this framework is the approach that we've taken, because it allows us to look at different options and perhaps implement more than one, depending on over time what makes the most sense. And it may not be the same, in every single instance. So,
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Wow, perfect timing. Councilmember Nurse has questions.
Okay, try to be short. Thank you, Chair. I just have 3 or 4 questions. I wanted to know how we are doing on the goal of not sending waste to incinerators by 2030. I see from the report the 2032 contract, in 2032, the Jersey contract expires to the incinerator. So what's DSNY's plan, and are we on track to meet that goal?
Certainly, we are tracking the expiration of that contract as well as many others that end within this planning period, because most of them were 20-year contracts. And once we implemented the 2006 swamp, we're going to be coming up on most of them either at the end of this next planning period or in the beginning of the next. So that's what we lay out as our commitment in this space, is understanding what are our options when those contracts come up. What is the best thing that we can do, both from a value, environmental, all the considerations perspectives?
I don't have much time, so I'm just mostly concerned about where are we at in terms of being on track to not send waste to the incinerators, or at least to the one Jersey one.
We are on track to reevaluate that contract when it expires in 2032.
And I see it says no option for renewal.
Correct.
Right.
So we will have to do a competitive procurement or a negotiated acquisition, something that would fall under the PPB rules.
And in your procurement option, would an incinerator be included in that?
Thermal treatment is, as the state guides us, actually higher up on the waste management hierarchy than disposal.
Right, I understand that, but we have a city law that we passed in 2023 that says by 2030, we have a goal of not to send to incinerators. So the idea that we would put out a procurement bid for an incinerator, and I understand you're calling it thermal, or but it's incineration. Why would we include that if we have this law in the books?
Councilmember, I just appreciate your point very much. And very quickly, we just have to be careful from the administration side not to prejudice those procurements. So I'll just put it another way. We're very aware of the city law and can't make a specific statement about what will or will not be included in those procurements because we don't want to open ourselves up to litigation, but very aware of the city's commitment.
Right. I mean, you could open yourself up to litigation by violating the law.
Noted.
Right. Okay. Great. So I see in the testimony you say that in 2027 you anticipate full implementation of the CWZ, and I'm just wondering why at the end of 2026 is not a goal for you all, and when in 2027 do you fully anticipate those zones being stood up?
It's like January 3rd. Like it is end of 2026, it's just the holiday time.
Thank you. And then, for a while, I've been trying to pass legislation to make available the DSNY marine transfer stations where there is capacity for commercial tipping. And you all essentially refused to do the environmental review for us to vote on the legislation for over a year. And we know that opening up these stations for capacity is part of reducing vehicle miles, creating opportunities for trucks to tip their payload, and I just don't, and also to address the environmental justice of trash coming to a certain subset of neighborhoods that are mostly communities of color. So I just don't understand why you can't commit to do the environmental review in order for us to pass the legislation. It feels like a deep disrespect of the legislative powers that are given to us through the city charter.
DSNY can certainly do an environmental review on this. However, we cannot do one until we know the very specific details about which trucks, how often, would be interested in utilizing the facility. That is the essence.
I just disagree. I mean,
I've done a number of environmental reviews, and for the Staten Island compost facility included, and we have hourly truck data that we are required to analyze by type of truck.
And you all have not, and my understanding is, can you confirm or tell me that you don't have this? Have you ever asked any of the commercial carters if they would make use of any of those MTSs?
We have, and we have that interest from the procurement process.
Okay.
Until they roll out the zones in the areas that would utilize the transfer stations, we will not have robust enough data to pass muster from a seeker perspective on an environmental review.
Okay. You know what capacity is available at those MTSs, right?
do. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you can say X amount of tonnage usually equates to X amount of trucks, right?
It also depends on the routing and where the truck's coming and going from, what intersections are they using. It's very specific, detailed data.
So the environmental review would be specific to truck traffic around the station?
Correct.
Okay, so it's still, to me, I'm not understanding the routes piece.
Be happy to sit down and go through with
Well, we did
that in more
try
detail.
for a year to sit down with you all. So I guess what I'm asking on record now is, can you commit to doing it in 2026 when the zones are stood up?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Banks?
Just to clarify, it would be in 27 when after the very beginning of
Okay,
27.
January 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the SWAMP 26 emphasizes improving public education and outreach. However, one of my local community boards, Community Board 5 subcommittee, has struggled to get the DSNY to even come to a meeting when requested. I just want to know what's the delay, and get into the subcommittee for Community Board 5 so that they can get any concerns or questions answered.
Councilmember, with respect, it's not correct. We will we have met with.
You said
every
it's not
community board.
correct. Are you going to correct it?
I don't know who they communicated with. If it was someone on my team, I will take care of it. We make ourselves incredibly available to every community board. I'd love to just know specifically who you're hearing from and who you spoke to. I also just need to correct.
The chair of the subcommittee.
Great.
So,
Which subcommittee?
yeah, the chair of the sanitation
The
subcommittee.
Sanitation Subcommittee of Community Board 5. Okay. And
How
I'll
will
find
the
out who they
DSN
reached out to.
Yeah, thank you. How will the DSNY ensure that community boards and neighborhood groups receive timely and consistent engagement, particularly when residents want clarity about new programs like the Empire Bins, containerization initiatives?
Our team is at community board meetings virtually every night, which is why I'm surprised to hear that one community board has been having trouble reaching us.
Well, Board 5, that's
Right, understood.
services.
But to your question about how we will engage in continued outreach, this is an ongoing effort on truly a daily basis. There are people from DSNY at community boards every evening.
Well, you have there's a new year coming, new administration. There's definitely opportunity to correct that. When it comes to the updated waste infrastructure and what it really means, Swamp 26 talks about updated waste infrastructure as a major long-term goal. What specific upgrades should communities expect in the upcoming years with new transfer stations, improved local waste facilities, better containerization systems, or modern equipment? And how will these upgrades directly improve day-to-day sanitation services for the residents?
Thank you for that question, Council Member. We are, as discussed, not proposing any new infrastructure. We may apply new technologies at existing infrastructures. Our industry, like many others, is exploring AI in a variety of applications. I had the pleasure this fall of visiting the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, the material recovery facility, and they're using robots to try to pick out recyclables. So we'll see applications such as that, I think, continue to come into play in our solid waste system, but not any new facilities proposed as of now.
Okay. And when it comes to illegal dumping and the long-term plan and hotspot strategies, illegal dumping is an ongoing and chronic issue in the 42nd Council District and across the city. It affects cleanliness, public health, and small businesses and overall quality of life. Does the Swamp 26 include a long-term plan to address illegal dumping, including expanded enforcement, surveillance, cleanup, crews, community partnerships, or dedicated hotspots?
So illegal dumping falls out of scope of the solid waste management plan. We are focused on what happens to material generally after it's been collected, but Deputy Commissioner Goodman can speak to our programming.
Councilmember, while it is outside the scope of the swamp, it is a major issue for us. We've deployed a network of over 300 cameras citywide, many funded by members of this council. And we just announced a new way for New Yorkers to, it's a $4,000 fine. Right. New Yorkers to be eligible for a $2,000 bounty if they submit video of illegal dumping in their communities. You can send that video to illegaldumpingtips@dsny.nyc.gov.
Okay. And the last thing, I just want to show a picture of a problematic area in my district where there's constant illegal dumping along Van Sinderen between Dumont. And it's I was driving by there just a couple of days ago, and this has been a constant. We've had a constant dumping of illegal garbage there. So we want to work with you to address this issue. We've worked with you in the past to have crews go out there and clean, but we want to see how we can have a better approach or strategy.
And we've got to do more. That's somebody's neighborhood. Right.
All right. And I'll get this information to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I have to request the opportunity to correct something we said to Councilmember Nurse. I was thrown off by the dates being at the end of the year. At 2 zones coming online at a time, it's 26 and 27 completing like January 3rd, 28. So I apologize. I was thrown off, and if you'd like to ask follow-up questions, if the chair will allow it, that's my fault. It's a two-year rollout, 26 and 27 for commercial waste zones. So they'll be fully operational. End of 27, not beginning of 27.
Okay. Let's pivot to next set of questions. Waste export. DSNY exports a lot of waste. Approximately 10,670 tons of DSNY managed waste are exported from the city daily. 85% is transported through long-distance rail to landfills upstate in Connecticut, Georgia, Kentucky, New Jersey, Ohio, etc. New York, Virginia, and North Carolina's landfills will reach capacity by 2050. 7 of the city's 9 municipal waste export contracts will expire before 2036. What is the city doing today to reduce waste export?
The entire 2026 swamp is focused on reducing waste export. We are excited about the 8 program areas, each diving into specific waste streams, specific approaches that will help us reduce waste, reduce reliance on export, and all the associated concerns we've been speaking about today. It's important to acknowledge that we must take action in all of those program areas. So the swamp really only achieves the goals if we work on organics, on construction waste, on commercial waste altogether.
How many of these contracts does DSNY expect to renew, and how many will require a new procurement process with outside vendors?
That will depend on the specifics of each contract, which we will evaluate in enough time, sufficient time, in order to take an appropriate procurement action. So, for example, if there is a renewal, we would evaluate whether it's in the city's best interest to exercise that. If it's in the mutual interest of both parties, we would have to consider that negotiation, if any. So it really depends on every contract, but that is the majority of the work that the Bureau of Solid Waste Management oversees. So we have an entire team focused on tracking those dates and making sure that we're ready.
What factors do you contemplate in determining whether or not to renew?
We would consider pricing. What does the contract say about pricing going forward? We would take a look into the market. As I mentioned, we have some attachments to the solid waste management plan. One of them is about local capacity, so we'll continue to use that as a resource as we have to make these decisions. And we will also continue to collaborate with our peers. One of the things I enjoy most about my job is speaking with our colleagues who are also managing solid waste for the region in large cities and understanding how they're approaching some of our shared challenges.
What has the city's relations been like with other U.S. states that are waste export destinations? Have these states or their localities ever expressed intentions to stop accepting New York City's waste?
In the time that I've been with DSNY, we have not had a specific example around this. I have experienced it in my career. Certainly.
You have?
Not at DSNY, but I've been working in solid waste for about 20 years, and this is our challenge. As you mentioned, there maybe aren't as many people interested in solid waste as we would all like, but the communities who do host some of this infrastructure are certainly some of the primary stakeholders we need to consider when making these decisions, and that is something that we will address as we move into the future of the plan and implementation.
Have advocacy groups acting on behalf of residents of U.S. states that are waste export destinations attempted to communicate with New York City about the impact that our waste has on their communities? If so, what have those communications been, and what has been the city's response?
As part of the current public comment period for the swamp, we have received comments from our neighbors around our solid waste programming. And so we are going to address those comments as described earlier as part of our process. We will document what the specific concerns are and formulate a response as part of the finalization of our plan.
Going back to waste incineration, some waste is also exported for incineration at Reworld Essex, New Jersey. However, reduced capacity there will limit the city's future options for waste incineration. DSNY has a 20-year contract with Reworld Essex to incinerate up to 985,000 tons of waste annually. The contract expires in 2032 with no renewal option. Under the draft 2026 plan, DSNY would continue monitoring thermal treatment technologies. The city's contract with Reworld Essex Incineration Facility in New Jersey, which receives 12% of our waste, will end in 2032 with no renewal option. Where will DSNY redirect this waste to when the contract expires?
This is something we spoke about with Councilmember Nurse. I'd also hope that we make progress towards our 2026 swamp goals by the time we reach 2032, so that the need for disposal capacity is not the same as it is today, and that we've reduced our reliance on any type of end-of-life management for waste that could be diverted. So that's the first priority. I think the next priority is continuing to monitor developments and alternatives. Right now, the primary alternatives for solid waste management, besides recycling and recovery, are landfilling and traditional combustion. That may change by the time we are in a position to enter into new contracts, and that is part of our work, is knowing what those alternatives are and going through the due diligence of making the right choice for the city.
I'd like to recognize Councilmember Vernicall for joining us. The draft swamp mentions, in quote, DSNY will prioritize planning for changes to real-world Essex incineration capacity, end quote. Does this mean that DSNY is planning for reductions from current levels in the quantity of waste sent there for incineration?
That is essentially the discussion we just had. The more that we can reduce, the less we will need that capacity or any capacity. So
is it planning for reductions?
Certainly, if we don't need as much capacity when that time comes, we wouldn't need to enter into an agreement for that higher level of tonnage.
Thanks. Since the time of the 2006 swamp, has the city considered constructing an incinerator in New York City? Just for the record.
No.
Okay. Does DSNY have a long-term plan to reduce its reliance on waste incineration facilities? If so, will this plan be included in the revised swamp draft?
Since we use a mix of incineration and landfilling to manage the solid waste at the end of its life, any reductions we have will thereby reduce incineration. So yes.
Regarding commercial waste, concerns have been expressed about the city's lack of data regarding miles currently traveled by commercial waste vehicles prior to the implementation of commercial waste zones, leading to difficulty calculating the reductions in vehicles miles traveled due to commercial waste zones. Has DSNY considered asking awardees in zones which have not yet been implemented to report their current vehicles miles traveled?
So when we initiated the commercial waste zone program, we did complete one of those lovely environmental reviews, and it gave us a baseline picture of truck activity to estimate the reductions we could expect from the program. We don't have the authority to collect that VMT, vehicle mile traveled data, until a zone has been fully implemented, sort of a similar challenge we were talking about earlier. So we are really focused on building a system that is efficient and offers us more transparent data into what's happening, and making sure that the carters are operating within the new zone structure and the rules and regulations that apply. So we will see more data as the program is rolled out.
Have you tried asking them for that information, even though you're saying you're not legally required to do so?
We can certainly ask for it as part of the programming. The issue is more that the whole program isn't rolled out at this time.
Got it. I mean, having that information will still be very helpful. So maybe we should gather our brains around that to figure out how we can collect that information, because it would be helpful in real time now. All right, pivoting now to constructions and demolition waste. Construction and demolition debris and fill must be disposed of separately from other waste streams and account for nearly 50% of New York City's waste. In 2022, the private sector produced approximately 5.3 million tons of C&D waste. If the swamp is implemented, C&D diversion rates could increase from 50% to 60%. The city's commercial waste zones program does not cover construction and demolition waste, although nearly 50% of the city's waste stream comes from these C&D carters. C&D referring to construction and demolition for everyone. What can the city do to advance some of the promises of commercial waste zones, such as reduced emissions and incentives for lowering waste production to the C&D waste sector?
Chair, you make an excellent point about C&D waste being such a large percentage of the waste stream. And I think it's one of the things I love about this solid waste management plan is it's really the first time that we're standing up C&D as an area to focus on. In our work developing the programming under this umbrella, we learned a lot more about this industry in New York City. Looking at the state swamp, you quoted that about 50% of that material is recycled citywide, which is better than other material streams. So we're not starting maybe at the same place with other waste streams, but there's certainly room for improvement. And I think from the city's perspective, our real leverage is in our specifications around how construction happens, whether it's a city project or other entities. The Port Authority has actually led in this way, and we are looking to them for some of their success stories on these material streams specifically.
The swamp mentions the city's asphalt millings bank and recycled concrete aggregate bank. What happens to the materials from these facilities that are not used?
So the New York City Department of Transportation operates these facilities, and they're primarily related to their ongoing work maintaining city infrastructure, sidewalks, roads. For the material that they can't use, it is actually made available for free to those who would want to use it, and we encourage folks who may have a use for it to take advantage of that program.
What measures, is it only DOT that
Operates those facilities?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What measures does the
That's the only city agency that operates them. There may be commercial entities that operate similar facilities, but they're not within the jurisdiction of the city.
Thanks for clarifying. What measures does DSNY take to ensure that communities that neighbor these concrete and asphalt recycling facilities are not adversely affected by dust, noise, or other nuisance from the facility?
What's really unique about transfer stations in New York City is they're dually permitted by both the state and DSNY. So there are many opportunities to ensure that these facilities are operating as required under regulations, and certainly as a policymaker, there's opportunities to change or address those regulations if they are deemed to be insufficient.
Is there anything that you think is currently deemed insufficient that we should be working on?
No, I think the rules have been developed over time. Certainly, it's difficult to cite facilities such as this in an urban environment, and I think that is going to be a continuous challenge for us as we increase resource recovery, but that's the nature of living in an urban, dense metropolis.
I haven't heard the word metropolis since college. But
Chair,
it's derived from the word polis, by the way, which means affairs of the city. It was one of the first things I've learned in high school that I think inspired me for public service. So anyway, that word sticks out. In the swamp, the DSNY states it will achieve 30% diversion by 2036, a huge jump from the current roughly 19% diversion rate that has held steady for decades. We welcome this ambitious goal. Which categories of waste and which specific programs will enable DSNY to achieve this doubling in the diversion rate over 10 years? Specifically, what outreach and education programs, enforcement, additional legislation, and budgetary dollars will be needed to achieve this goal?
That question has a lot of parts.
Sorry about
Thank you.
that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start by talking about the specific waste streams that DSNY believes has the most promise to really advance us to the goal, and then I'll ask Commissioner Goodman to speak about some of the outreach and education related to that. certainly organics, we've talked a lot about today. We know it's about 30% of the residential waste stream, and we have a huge opportunity to ramp up that program over the next 10 years, and that can really lead the way on achieving that goal. When you look to our other waste streams that are relatively large portions of the pie, paper and metal, glass, and plastic follow. Our capture rate on paper is pretty good. We could do a little bit better on paper. Metal, glass, and plastic, we have more opportunity. So those could be areas that we focus on. And then some of our special waste streams that we also talked about today. Textiles has been growing as a portion of the waste stream. So it's really important that we continue to develop that program as we see more and more of that in the residential discards. But do you want to speak about education?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilmember. You're right that this is a really tremendous change, and it requires substantial participation increases. I believe we're going to speak more about this later, but the combination of traditional outreach and education with outreach in the form of enforcement is really something that's a relatively new innovation, and something that for the city to be more comfortable using house-to-house enforcement as a piece of outreach and education to get people comfortable with this. Although, as you know, we always do extensive warning periods, extensive public meetings. In fact, sorry I didn't catch Councilmember Banks, but just to get it on the record, I have some updates to one of his questions that we did visit that community board in May of this year, and we're happy to go back. So, the outreach will continue to meet all of these goals.
You have any specific examples of what that outreach and education program is going to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked, for example, about textile programs, right? And the fact that the e-cycle program is already available, and the e-cycle and refashion programs are already available to all buildings with 10 or more units. We are planning to do substantial direct door-to-door outreach about these programs to help foster participation as part of Local Law 88 of 23. That would be one example of something that's coming up in the year ahead.
Will DSNY leverage reuse, repair, and stop and swap events to achieve these goals?
Absolutely, yes.
What are
indeed.
some milestones? Thank you for that, Commissioner. What are some milestones that DSNY must reach in order to reach the 30% diversion rate by 2036?
With the citywide organics program collection rolled out around the city, we sort of hit a major milestone there. We will need to continue the outreach and education that we spoke about, as well as our community recycling events that are part of the plan. Essentially, pursuing all of the 126 strategies that we've outlined are part of the way that we're going to get there. So it's not just one thing.
Does DSNY plan to go back to a fining structure for composting?
I would say that enforcement never stopped as part of the organics program, and we've been continuing to do boots on the ground, door knocking, outreach to residents in support of getting higher participation rates, everyone familiar with the program. So that remains part of our approach.
I thought the fining did stop.
No, Mr. Chair. Fines
The
were
curbside.
refocused on the sort of worst repeat offenders, large buildings that had received multiple warnings. They did continue all through the spring, summer, and fall, while moving into a more direct outreach and education phase for smaller buildings, first-time offenders, that kind of thing.
Do you have a number on how many fines were issued, or?
It's in the dozens, but can also add that as part of this process, we knocked just shy of 800,000 doors, 797,191, held 83 info sessions, a total of 1,400 in-person events that included organics outreach. So enforcement has continued against the worst offenders while doing substantial work to get people who just need to learn a little bit more the access to the information that they need.
What reporting and granular open data will the DSNY commit to provide so that the public and the council can see progress and community groups can assist in this ambitious goal of 30% diversion?
In addition to the data on open data that we provide for tonnage collected by material stream in each sanitation collection district, which by the way, I think is pretty amazing data. We produce these reports, as mentioned earlier, the biennial reports to DEC. The 2023 and 2024 report that was just posted to our website is 253 pages of information about our programming. So we feel proud of the amount of information we share about the work that we're doing. That's where I would start.
The department has changed the public-facing open data set, DSNY monthly tonnage data, in July of 2025 to report a combined residential collection plus institutional collection tonnage for refuse, MGP, paper. Will the department disaggregate this data, as has been requested by a variety of groups, including the swabs?
We acknowledge that question. It has been submitted to our planning group and to the department. We have taken the initiative to understand the heart of the question. At the same time, although the swamp doesn't contemplate collection logistics, it's certainly something the department is continuously evaluating and looking for efficiencies in. Based on our investigations, it appears that our collection operations have changed such that the data sets we previously reported are no longer collected. So it's not necessarily a decision to not share data. It's a decision based on our change in operations that the exact same data sets are no longer available. But we are going to respond in writing to this question since it has come up a couple times, as you noted.
Is there an operational challenge to disaggregating the data that you already have?
It's more about the way the trucks are running and what routes are being combined and what material types are being combined on one truck.
All right. Are there materials that are presently designated recyclable materials that the city has trouble with repurposing or selling? If so, which materials?
Our contracts that require the eventual recycling of material collected put the onus on that market access and marketing of materials on the vendor. So it's not directly DSNY's jurisdiction. However, we work closely with Sims Municipal Recycling that handles the bulk of material, and certainly they share with us challenges around film. You know, we collect a lot of our materials in plastic bags, and that can be a more difficult material to find end users for.
Any other materials that come to mind like that?
That's the primary one. Some of the different plastic polymers are less reliable to market than, say, milk jugs and water bottles, which have a pretty steady demand.
Thank you. What efforts will the department take to assess and measure if containerization is negatively impacting diversion and therefore recycling or organic participation rates?
In order to effectively monitor the impact of containerization on diversion, we must rely on the waste characterization study. The last one was from 2023, and we have another one that we're gearing up for, thanks to the council bill of this year. Yes, yeah. 2024. So we will use that information and we may even be able to study the areas where containerization is being piloted and layer on some specific sorts to better answer that question. Certainly now we can use citywide averages to see how that is performing in those districts, but it would obviously be even more informative if we had very specific data to those areas.
Is DSNY considering a commercial waste recycling enforcement program?
We have a commercial recycling enforcement program already, but I'll let Deputy Commissioner speak more about that.
Thank you very much.
Which activity is it seeing?
We do enforce commercial waste recycling now. One of the great features of the commercial waste zone program, though, is that for the first time ever, it will cost a business less to dispose of their recyclables than it does to dispose of their trash. It won't just be the stick anymore. There will be a carrot as well, that they will save meaningful amounts of money by properly recycling. That said, we do write summonses for failure to properly sort commercial recyclables. And it's a good opportunity to mention, as we've done at 8 or 10 hearings or so, that the city's law about commercial organics enforcement is woefully out of date. Local Law 146 of 2013 is a relic of another time that is completely out of step with the successful residential organics program. So we would once again plead with the council, please give us the ability to enforce more commercial recycling.
And as it relates to that piece of legislation, we would also emphasize the importance of prioritizing donation of edible food from commercial establishments as a preferred end-of-life management to recycling that as compost or digesting it.
The swamp highlights community-led reuse and recycling events. What are some current examples of these events that New York City residents can make use of, and where do they take place?
We have a program of community events, one in each district. Kate, would you like to share more about those?
Each council district?
Yeah.
Community district.
So in compliance with Local Law 88 of 2023, we offer 59 community recycling events, one in each district. We had a couple events just this past weekend, one at College of Staten Island and one in Park Slope. And we have a number of events coming up in January. You can go to our website at nyc.gov/recycling events to see the full list.
And that's another data set in our biennial reports where we share where each of those events happened.
Thank you, Commissioner. Pilot programs for repair and reuse events. I think I already asked that question. My apologies. In the absence of state-level extended producer responsibility, has the city explored a mattress reuse or mattress donation program? What are some obstacles presented by this type of programming, and what are some of the ways the city can address these concerns?
DSNY has worked with NYCHA on a program that they initiated for a mattress recycling pilot. Logistically, the program has been very successful, and we've discussed both with NYCHA and the company that's providing the service of recycling about how we can look to expand that program. Certainly a program such as statewide EPR would really help that move forward because the costs of managing the mattresses outside of the regular solid waste system are exponentially higher. So we need to justify an alternative approach to this material, and certainly having funding from an external source would help.
And my apologies if this is already covered by the 2026 draft plan, but is the department willing to expand its mattress reuse or mattress donation program as part of the next plan?
Certainly, we'd like to expand it. We'd have to receive funding or otherwise find alternative vendors who have a lower cost option for recycling these outside of the solid waste system.
For purposes of enforcement, how does DSNY determine whether a business is required to recycle its textile waste? What does this enforcement look like?
This is something that we've identified as an area we would like to dig into further as part of the next swamp, and it's one of our specific commitments under the commercial program. Understanding what percentage of a waste stream, again, is a waste characterization study, and what's challenging is the time period over which you sample and analyze that data. Certainly, you can't do it on a real-time, all-the-time basis, and a waste stream from an industry may fluctuate over time, so we've identified this as an area where we can improve our methodology and therefore the diversion of textiles from the commercial sector.
What obstacles has the city experienced when advocating in Albany for broader extended producer responsibility of batteries?
Certainly, rechargeable batteries and lithium-ion batteries in particular have become a real challenge for our industry, and it permeates every waste stream because we find these batteries in so many products, even greeting cards. So we've been hit by that challenge of just they're in every waste stream. So how do we come up with a system and a program that addresses their pervasiveness throughout our solid waste system? We have a number of options available to residents for the safe take back, and the statewide program does cover some, but not all rechargeable batteries. In fact, there is a bill that was sent to the governor today for her signature to expand that legislation to include e-bike batteries, which are not currently covered in the EPR program.
Did she sign it? We don't know.
Not
Okay.
not yet, as far as we know.
Maybe Zoran's gonna run for governor next. I'm kidding. Garber recycling program. What is the current practice for recycling carpets?
Oh, carpet. Yes. This is another EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Program, that was passed at the state level. So this is rolling out around the state as we speak. DSNY is engaged in the implementation as a major stakeholder. And Kate Kitchener here is representing us and helping to develop what we call a convenience standard for the city. So how do we make a program that's accessible and convenient for all New Yorkers, in this case, statewide, to help recover a carpet?
What are the safety precautions in place to contain any harmful material that may be generated during the carpet recycling process?
We may need to get back to you on that. Since this
I'm
is
not sure I know the answer to
This
that.
is a new program for the state. As far as I understand, most of the recycling may not be happening in state. The aggregation, right, the collection aggregation will be happening as part of the EPR program. I don't believe the EPR directs the recycling to happen in state. So it could be in another jurisdiction, and we would need to understand where that is and gain more information to adequately answer that question.
Thank you. Has the city identified potential sites for a public venue container reuse program?
We have not identified specific sites, but we have identified that that's something we'd like to try, and we've included it in the next swamp.
That's great. All right, now moving on to organic waste. Told y'all we have a lot of questions. The swamp highlights plans to collaborate with community organizations to operate a composting facility on DSNY property in Gowanus. Can you please give us some additional details about this plan?
This is a facility that was constructed by virtue of some other city projects. We had a salt pile. DEP was doing some stormwater infrastructure, so we were able to also develop a mid-sized compost facility on this site in Gowanus in Brooklyn. And we'll be working with Big Reuse to start operations on this facility, hopefully next year, to compost right there.
That's great. And what is the expected capacity for this facility?
200 tons per year. I believe it will be a registered facility with the Department of Environmental Conservation, not a permitted facility.
And you said it'll be operational by next year?
We hope. They have to finalize the registration. We have to finalize some agreements between the city and the operating partner.
Has the city identified other sites for this similar type of collaboration?
We have not identified specific sites, although, again, in the solid waste management plan, we've made a commitment to convene a group of stakeholders around this to look at organics processing capacity overall, not just composting.
We'd love to see more of this. What percentage of source separated organics collected by DSNY must be landfilled due to contamination?
That really depends on the time of year and the area where the material is being collected. Right now is our high leaf season, so our contamination rate goes down is the percentage of overall collections. On average, over the year across all of our contracts and locations, it's on par with other urban programs, or around 25%.
Thanks for answering that question. What engagement is DSNY doing or planning to do to bridge the gap between tenants in multifamily buildings and building owners regarding residential organic waste recycling?
Joshua.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We've done really substantial outreach around this program, including when it first started rolling out in Queens at the end of 2022 and continuing really up to the present. We're, in the next couple of weeks, going to hit 800,000 doors knocked. We've held 83 info sessions on this. We gave away 190,000 free brown bins. We've issued over 40,000 warnings, and also, created the first ever 311 service request for tenants whose buildings are not providing access to compost as required by law. So you can call us, you can let us know, hey, I live in an apartment, I want to compost, they're not letting me. DSNY enforcement agents will come by and pay special attention to that building.
Are you seeing that compliance is higher in buildings with tenants versus
Interestingly, the highest performing districts do have a large number of single family homes. Actually, Staten Island does incredibly well on a per capita basis. But we're seeing growing compliance and participation in multifamily buildings, in particular in Manhattan and Northern Brooklyn.
I'm sure the advocates will have their piece to share on that very shortly. I'm looking forward to hearing from them on what we believe the city needs to do with that. When will DSNY restart residential enforcement of source-separated organics? I know you mentioned earlier that
It never
the
fully
worst-
stopped.
But how do we get to the full Is there an intention to implement against everyone?
There is. As you know, recycling has been mandatory for about 20, 25 years in the city. And there was a similar learning period. In fact, I think that the organics enforcement period has been handled much better than recycling enforcement was in the late 90s, where the program stopped entirely, came back, went, left, all this stuff. I also would note, ahead of talking about enforcement, that we just hit 3 weeks in a row of record-breaking tonnage, right? What we're doing now is working. Looking forward to hearing more, certainly, from the council and the advocates about what to do to improve those numbers. But 3 weeks in a row of the highest participation ever in this program. That said, we have expressed previously that the legal requirement to source separate compostable material is likely to go back into effect citywide at the start of the new year.
How much, I'm going now to co-digestion of organic waste at wastewater resource recovery facilities. How much money has DSNY and DEP spent to date on building or expanding co-digestion sites outside of Newtown Creek?
I think it's important to talk through the steps required for co-digestion to begin to answer that question. So unlike a compost facility where it's typical that the actions to complete the beneficial use are contained in one site, with co-digestion, the material may need to make multiple stops to be able to be prepared for co-digestion. So for example, in the program we are running now with DEP, the material goes to the Varick Avenue transfer station that's owned and operated by Waste Management. That's where it is made into a slurry, we call it, smoothie maybe, if you will. It's a pumpable form of the organics that are then delivered to Newtown Creek and inserted into the digesters at the wastewater resource recovery facility. In order to do that, there needs to be infrastructure on site at the wastewater facility, as well as infrastructure to utilize the biogas that is produced. So the investments made to enable the current program were largely made by the private sector and by DEP. So questions about expanding the program would likely go to DEP.
So you don't have any insights on how much money has been spent?
I do not.
Okay, I would like to say we've been joined by future council member Justin Sanchez from the Bronx. He's in the back. I'm excited for his involvement on sanitation issues in the next term. He cares deeply about the issue. And what further spending is planned over the next 5 to 10 years? Is that also a question for DEP?
It is, yes.
The swamp mentions the city's earlier assessment of a wastewater resource recovery facility on Rikers Island. What is the expected timeline for the establishment of this facility?
Certainly that timeline is dependent on the closure of Rikers Island, which is something that will be addressed by the next administration.
Approximately how many tons of organic waste could this facility process each day?
The proposed facility at Rikers Island has not been developed to that level of specificity. At this time, I believe it's a concept of how the island could be repurposed as a new benefit of infrastructure to the city.
Is it the department's hope that this facility is followed through on?
Certainly, the opportunity to find space for new infrastructure is a unique opportunity. So I think the department would welcome any opportunity to consider underutilized space in the city for resource recovery infrastructure. Now
moving on to transfer stations. The Transform Don't Trash Coalition published a report which stated that approximately 75% of privately managed waste is still trucked in and out of just 5 of the city's 59 community districts. What programs or facilities will the administration focus on to more fairly distribute the burden felt by these 5 community districts to other areas around the city?
So these areas were addressed in Local Law 152 of 2018, also known as the Waste Equity Law, which reduced the permitted capacity at transfer stations in these districts. And these reductions have been fully implemented. For example, the permitted capacity in Brooklyn Community District 1 was reduced by 50%, in Queens Community District 12 and Bronx Community Districts 1 and 2 by 33%. And we really are looking at the commercial waste zone program implementation as a way to reduce the commercial waste truck traffic by an estimated additional 50% citywide when fully implemented. And we've talked a lot about that program today.
As part of the 2006 SWAMP, the city prepared an environmental assessment to allow commercial waste to be tipped at DSNY marine transfer stations. However, DSNY has maintained that too much time has passed to rely on that environmental assessment for present considerations of this type of policy. Does DSNY plan to start accepting commercial waste at marine and rail-based transfer stations overnight to reduce diesel truck traffic in overburdened communities?
We've spoken about this opportunity a couple of times today. The only thing I'd add to what DSNY has previously shared is a little more information about the pricing. And this is one of the key elements we will need to poke at as we understand the viability of this opportunity. Right now, we believe the private sector tipping fees, as we call them, at transfer stations are, say, $100, maybe $120 a ton, whereas to deliver waste to the marine transfer stations would cost $200 or more a ton. So the question is going to be, will there be private entities willing, able, interested in paying a tip fee at that level for the use of the transfer stations?
And I think you already answered no to this before, but just for the record, again, does DSNY have any sites in mind for the construction of new marine transfer stations?
No, we do not.
Is there an alternate plan to barge recyclable waste from Manhattan since Gansevoort was not used as planned?
There is not an alternate plan, although we do consider to export all of the paper from Manhattan through the West 59th Street Marine Transfer Station.
The SWAMP states that the city will consider siting renewable energy facilities at Freshkills and Edgemere landfills. Can you elaborate more on what those sites might look like and when they might take form?
The first example of this is the solar feasibility study that is underway right now on the Edgemere landfill, which is near the Rockaways in Queens, that we are conducting in coordination with DCAS and NYPA to see what the viability is of installing solar panels on that facility. From there, we will look at opportunities at Freshkills in the context of the larger long-term plans to repurpose that facility to benefit New Yorkers.
My last set of questions are on education and outreach, so I'm assuming this is for you, Commissioner Goodman. The SWAMP highlights ongoing efforts and upcoming plans to leverage enforcement as a form of education and outreach. Can you provide information about the past successes or failures of similar efforts?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, we think that the use of enforcement as an education tool around organics has been very successful. We're hitting record-breaking tonnages, seeing massive participation because we're partnering traditional outreach programs and education programs with enforcement, where people are really held accountable for failure to participate in necessary zero waste programs.
Can you speak to the successes or failures?
Well, I think it is very successful in that it's led to these record-breaking tonnages.
What about the failures?
Failures? I mean, failures of enforcement. I don't know that there have been any. Obviously, we think that you need to use every tool at your disposal to get the word out there, and know that this is a law and order focused council that's been very interested in providing us with the tools that we need to, obviously the swamp does not focus on collection operations, but to get the bags off the street, to continue to support diversion, and also to sort of build this into design best practices. We removed a lot of the barriers to entry when it comes to organic separation in this version of the program. And when you talked about diversion related to the Empire bins earlier, right, the bins are sized based on trash set out. So repeated overflowing is something that would trigger an enforcement investigation and potential action beyond that.
The swamp mentions ongoing efforts to conduct neighborhood walkthroughs with community partners and elected officials to observe area conditions and apply targeted outreach. How many of these neighborhood walkthroughs has the SNY conducted to date?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know this is, I believe it's initiative 124 of 126, so back at the back of the swamp. The swamp is a commitment about what we will do over the next 10-year period. However, we do conduct walkthroughs more than one per week on average at the request of council members, community groups, and community boards, as well as individual residents. They're happening on a near constant basis at community request. We don't pick the neighborhoods. You request that we come in.
So it's on a request basis, not on a proactive basis.
We will go out and do walkthroughs if we think that there's something that we need to see. But generally speaking, the instigation for a walkthrough is that someone says, like, Councilmember Banks said, I have this site that has a lot of illegal dumping, right? So one of the things we would do about that report is arrange a walkthrough.
I'll say that anytime I requested a tour, y'all have done that, but the question is if it's proactive versus in reaction to the request.
And I guess I'll just
like
clarify,
to see more proactive side to things.
I think that's very reasonable. When we talk about a walkthrough, we're generally talking about something done by our civilian policy staff or engagement staff. We wouldn't think of it as a walkthrough, but I think this gets at what you're asking. Our sanitation supervisors, of which there are hundreds working a day, have an assigned area where they're supposed to observe and report conditions. So we wouldn't, when we wrote in Initiative 124 about walkthroughs, we weren't thinking about that. But I do think that gets at what you're asking about, and certainly we can talk about ways to tie those together more closely.
For the record, can you speak to which neighborhoods were visited and how these neighborhoods were chosen, and also which neighborhoods are being prioritized in the future?
Well, on just general all topics, we conduct neighborhood walkthroughs absolutely everywhere. I've been on them with dozens of council members in just the last year or so. And I don't think that there is neighborhood prioritization at all. It's a tactic we use citywide.
Are there any upcoming walkthroughs that we should be aware of?
I could take a look at my calendar and see what we got coming up this week. We have... I see one in Brooklyn CB 13. I see one in Brooklyn CB 2. I see one at PS 7 on 120th Street. So they continue in an ongoing way wherever necessary.
Okay. I would like to see more of a proactive engagement than just counts, because so a lot of times elected officials and community groups, they can be very, very busy. It doesn't mean that they should be not being, it still means they should still be getting those walkthroughs regardless. So as long as there's a systematic approach to this, I think that would be very helpful. In terms of legislation and enforcement, in the draft plan, there is the following statement in Attachment B regarding the impact of legislative solutions on waste reductions and diversion. In Attachment A, local laws relevant to waste management, New York City's Department of Sanitation capacity to enforce those laws is limited. Would the department consider expanding on this by providing analysis specifically to the degree it can and cannot enforce each of the legislative solutions listed in Attachment A and why?
Certainly. We took an inclusive approach to the legislation listed in that attachment, and some of it is actually not at our jurisdiction, meaning it could be state legislation that we're referencing, such as the plastic bag ban, some of the EPR programs that we've talked about. So in those cases, we are not the enforcement action. At the same time, for those that are under our jurisdiction, certainly there are some that are more difficult for us to enforce, such as the Skip That Stuff bill that the council has passed, where it relies on reporting by folks whose stuff wasn't skipped to let us know so we can investigate.
And would the department consider this an area requiring attention before submitting the draft to DEC?
No, I think it's reasonable in understanding that each of us has our own jurisdiction and limited resources to conduct enforcement.
All right, this panel is hereby excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Council.
We're going to be taking a 2-minute break as I have to run to the restroom. I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings of testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant at Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an acceptance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic. Engagement for the city's 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant at Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. I will now call the first panel: Celeste Perez, Justin Wood, Eric Goldstein, and Rhonda Kaiser. Is it a big? Oh, that's not bad at all. At 1 p.m. So we have to wait an hour and come back, right? Yeah. Yeah. Rhonda, you can't get the kids earlier, right? You can't get the kids to go earlier, right? You may begin.
Okay. Is it working? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good morning. My name is Celeste Perez. I'm with the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. We also go by NEJA. NEJA is a citywide membership network linking grassroots organizations from low-income neighborhoods and communities of color in the struggle for environmental justice. NEJA is also a founding member of the Transform Don't Trash Coalition, a longstanding coalition of environmental justice, labor, and climate organizations working to transform our city's sprawling solid waste management system. In New York City, while the total amount of waste handled at private transfer stations has decreased since local law 152, the current solid waste management system is still an ongoing environmental injustice in which 5 community districts handle nearly 24 waste facilities, while there are 45 community districts that have no waste facilities at all. These communities have historically had the highest rates of asthma, such as North Brooklyn, the South Bronx, which is where I'm from, and also suffer from asthma, and the Southeast Queens, according to the city's comptroller's audit report on fair share compliance. The solid waste management plan for 2026 should commit the city to move forward with the unfulfilled strategy of the last swamp of using municipal marine transfer stations to accept commercial waste, which environmental justice communities have long advocated for. DSNY reports have estimated that fully implementing the marine transfer stations would decrease truck traffic associated with commercial waste collection by 50% citywide, as measured in vehicle miles traveled, reducing both the number of trips and the length of collection routes for commercial waste. An environmental impact statement for the 2006 swamp was conducted to evaluate plans to accept 3,772 tons of commercial waste collected by private haulers at 4 distinguished marine transfer stations during overnight hours. However, the permit and tonnage data released has shown that several marine transfer stations still handle way less than their permits allow, ultimately delaying the relief to environmental justice communities. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Abreu. Thank you, committee council and members of the committee. We want to thank you not only for holding this hearing, but for all the work you've done to advance waste reduction and equity and climate justice over the last 4 years. It's been a pleasure. My name is Justin Wood. I'm the Director of Policy at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, also a member of the Transform Don't Trash New York City Coalition. We'll be submitting detailed comments prior to the January deadline on the 2026 swamp. So just wanted to highlight a few themes that will inform our comments. Similar to Celeste's comment, we'd really like to see this swamp fulfill the unfulfilled promises of the current swamp in terms of waste equity. The environmental impact study for accepting commercial waste at marine facilities was already completed 20 years ago. It's on the record. We'd also suggest that if further study is legally necessary, that it be completed as commercial waste zones are rolled out. And note that there are 2 zones that either contain or are adjacent to marine transfer facilities rolling out over the next 2 months. So we think there's a real opportunity to make these improvements and pilot this program as this critical program is rolling out. Similar to members of the council, we'd like to see a faster timeline for commercial waste zone rollout. We heard today it won't be completed until 2028. We think this is a critical foundation for waste reduction, safety, worker justice. It's a highly successful program and has huge potential. So we'd like to see this timeline accelerated now that DSNY has it down and is rolling these zones out one by one. Another thing we'd like to stress is the need in the swamp for long-term and stable funding sources for all of the waste reduction, recycling, composting programs that we support in the proposed swamp. And, too often over the last 20 years, we've seen the huge damage that sort of year by year budget cuts and increases and fluctuations do to public behavior and New Yorkers' learned behaviors around recycling. So we'd like to see the incoming Mamdani administration, the city council, the entire city's state legislative delegation, and DSNY really aggressively advocate for funding sources from the state, especially as the federal government has completely abdicated its responsibility to fund renewable energy and infrastructure, there's a huge opportunity for Governor Hochul and the state to step in with funding streams like the long overdue Cap and Invest program that was mentioned today, like extended producer responsibility programs, and in the immediate future, the Sustainable Futures Fund that legislators are talking about. So we'll detail all this and more, and thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Sergeant. Can you make it 3 minutes instead? And if anybody wants to add anything else, you may add another minute.
Good afternoon, Chair Abreu, unheralded council staff. Eric Goldstein from the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Transform Don't Trash Coalition. We appreciate your leadership in calling this important hearing. We're going to summarize our written testimony. There's much that is welcome in this draft solid waste management plan. It contains a wealth of data and information presented in one place and giving a comprehensive picture of the city's waste handling system. It embraces the state's waste management hierarchy, which places waste prevention at the top. And it includes more than a handful of ideas which, if fully implemented, could make New York City's waste disposal system more sustainable. So we acknowledge the good work that Jen McDonnell and Kate Kitchener and the SNY staff have done on this. But in the first council session focusing on the draft swamp, NRDC offers 3 preliminary thoughts on how the city can obtain maximum benefit from this once-in-a-decade opportunity to make New York's solid waste policy more sustainable, more cost-effective, and more supportive of the residents and neighborhoods throughout all 5 boroughs. First, it makes sense to ensure a broad and fair and far-reaching process for participation, review, and submission of this draft plan to the DEC as required by state law. We want to emphasize the importance of providing the public and the members of the council with sufficient opportunity to comment on the draft and have their ideas incorporated into the final plan. Such an approach is mandated by state law, which requires that local swamps shall, quote, address to the maximum extent practicable the comments and views expressed by concerned governmental, environmental, commercial, and industrial interests and the public on waste prevention, recycling, reuse, and disposal alternatives. We think it'll be impossible to submit a final plan by the end of January to the state, and we don't believe that that's required by law. Second, we're concerned that the draft plan in its current form, while comprehensive in the subjects it includes, has a commitment problem. It mentions many of the appropriate issue areas, but fails to provide the necessary departmental commitments to make change happen. Too often, the action items that are set forth in the draft schedule use words like study, explore, collaborate, or consider. This is not the fault of DSNY staff necessarily that prepared the draft, but presumably by decisions made by administration officials to prepare a plan that keeps, in too many instances, the department options wide open. But the purpose of a swamp is to drive policy forward and provide definitive action items that will achieve the goals of the state's hierarchy, the mandates of the city's zero waste law, and other mandatory, statutory, and sensible objectives that have been set forth by the city council over the years. Third, a word about the role the council should play to ensure that the final draft swamp achieves its full potential. To accomplish that objectives, we hope the council will hold a substantive hearing on the details of the DSNY draft in early 2026, after the 2026, after the members of the public and the council staff have had sufficient staff time to review the draft. We believe that such a council hearing will elicit valuable suggestions for sharpening and tightening the final product. We hope that the council will then be given sufficient time to review these comments and incorporate the best of them as amendments to the final plan. That's exactly what the process that was followed in 2006. We hope that there are elements of the 2006 plan that still need to be enforced, but we know the council has this authority and we believe it should use it. I can't let the earlier composting testimony stand without saying 3 quick things. There are 3 major problems with what we've heard today. 1, a wink and a nod approach to enforcement. 2, the failure to advance sufficient in-city composting capacity. And 3, a wrong-headed and deceptive practice of organic co-digestion with sewage sludge. We'll talk about those more in our written comments. And finally, we hope that you, Councilmember Abreu, will continue as chair to play a vital role in the development of the final swamp. But regardless of whether you do or not, we want to thank you for your leadership on swamp, on community composting, commercial waste zones, litter cleanup, waste equity, and containerization. You've done a great job, and we hope it continues. Thank you for your attention.
You're too kind, Eric. We don't know what the future holds, but certainly I've had an incredible time working with all of you. I think we've done some good things, and whether it's me or someone else, we'll see. We want to keep on the important work that you guys are carrying out. Rhonda?
Hello, Chair Abreu. Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify today. Of course, I'm Rhonda Kaiser, and I'm here today speaking on behalf of Cafeteria Culture as Program and Policy Director. And just to remind everybody, we are an environmental education organization, and our students become climate leaders in their own school cafeterias by taking action there. And they've sparked system-wide change that scales quickly across New York City, the largest school district in the country, and to other districts, school districts. So we helped in the past to catalyze elimination of styrofoam trays in schools, and also we started monthly plastic-free lunch day, which because of their students' work around plastic-free lunch day, school lunch service on regular days have reduced from 5.7 pieces per student to 1.8 pieces per student in just 2 years of plastic-free lunch days. So it's really changing procurement, and it's changing daily practices. So that's the kind of scaling that we like to do. And now we're piloting systemic food waste reduction. We've, in 5 pilots, we've reduced overall food waste by 50%, but increased student consumption by 15 to 46%, just by allowing students to choose what they want to eat within the USDA guidelines. These numbers show that it's not about scarcity or austerity, it's about agency. So as we looked at food waste, our students mapped the journey of trash and also the journey of the brown bin that was going to co-digestion. And after considering the truck traffic and other environmental harms for each of these waste streams, our students wanted to disrupt these systems. And so they now are community composting 1 day a week in their cafeterias by taking their food scraps to Compost Power's Polo Grounds site. And it's about 50 to 100 pounds a week, so we're measuring that now. We walk that over. Jameer is here, our new environmental justice fellow, thanks to NYSERDA. He walks it over, and our students participate in breaking down the food scraps in different phases of the process. And we're noticing a reduction in contamination of the organic stream on other days in the cafeteria as students have gained more agency in their food scraps processing. So we hope to continue piloting local composting for schools in other parts of the city to once again scale this waste reduction and the harms of processing organic waste. And we urge the council to pass Councilwoman Nurse's Intro 696 that prioritizes composting over co-digestion, and we hope that DSNY will consider community composting as a viable option and not just a little boutique community effort, but an actual way to process food waste.
Well, thank you all for your testimony. It is my hope and expectation that there will be more public hearings like this, so that we can keep raising the alarm on this issue. And to Eric's point too, right, the non-committal language that we're seeing, may versus do, may versus shall. As an attorney, I'll tell you those are big differences. And may is permissive and shall requires, right? So we need more shall language for the things that we do need. And so appreciate this panel for testifying. Whatever those gaps are that we want to see, filled in this plan, let's make it a big priority. Keep making it a big priority. When you submit your testimony, please let us know. We're going to read it. We believe very much in the Transform Don't Trash Coalition. So thank you very much. On the next panel, we have Gustavo, Dr. Samantha McBride, Lacey Tauber, and Justin Green. Dr. McBride, I saw you nodding your head or in disappointment the whole time. Looking forward to hearing about it. All right, we'll start off on this side.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. And I wanted to start by saying thank you for the questions that you've been asking, because I think that it's been reflecting a lot of what I am here to also highlight. So I wanted to just show appreciation for that first. Good afternoon. My name is Gustavo Alcocer, and I am here on behalf of the Ironbound Community Corporation. This is a community-based nonprofit based in Newark, New Jersey, with more than 50 years of environmental justice leadership. Ironbound Community Corporation strongly urges the solid waste management plan to commit the New York City Department of Sanitation to true waste diversion. New Yorkers need and deserve a waste system that prioritizes recycling, composting, organics, separation, and waste prevention. At the same time, DSNY must move away from contracting with incinerators outside New York City, especially Reworld, in Newark Ironbound community. Exporting New York City trash to overburdened environmental justice neighborhoods is not a solution, it's an injustice. I'm going to talk briefly about the Ironbound, which is already one of the most overpolluted communities in New Jersey. Every day, our residents breathe air shaped by the cumulative impacts of the East Coast's largest wastewater treatment plant, hazardous waste facilities, heavy industry, airports, port operations, diesel truck traffic, and more than 100 brownfield sites. And at the center of this pollution burden sits Reworld Essex, New Jersey's largest garbage incinerator, just yards from people's homes. This specific incinerator is one of the highest emitter of toxic pollutants in the entire state and has logged over 800 air permit violations since 2005, including burning unauthorized medical waste that sent pink and purple smoke into our neighborhood. When this incinerator burns trash, and this includes Manhattan's trash, toxic chemicals like dioxins are released into the air our families breathe. Manhattan sends 100% of its refuse to incineration, and 66% of that goes to Reworld Essex. This displacement of bad managed waste to the incinerator located in the Ironbound must stop. That is environmental injustice and environmental racism. DSNY's current contract guarantees more than 500,000 tons of waste a year to this facility through 2032. That number must go down, not up, and the city must plan to phase out and end, not renew this contract in 2033. We demand a clear plan to do this and for it to be communicated to affected communities. New York City has an enormous untapped potential for waste diversion. The recycling capture rate is under 20%. Curbside composting participation remains low, even though it is already collected on recycling days. Enforcement of existing laws is minimal. These failures mean more waste in being burned in the Ironbound, waste that could be composted, recycled, or prevented entirely. ICC urges DSNY to follow the leadership of the Transform Don't Trash New York City Coalition and adopt the People's Swamp, including stronger investments, widespread education, better enforcement, expanded diversion programs, and a clear commitment to phasing down incineration and landfilling. And when I say clear commitment, the Ironbound demands the DSNY to show us their plan to do this. The SWAM 26 is an opportunity for the DSNY to do better, to reduce waste at its source, to rely less on incineration, and to ensure that no community on either side of the Hudson River is forced to sacrifice its health for New York City's waste system. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Samantha McBride.
Samantha McBride from Baruch College. The draft swamp succeeds as a system description, and it is to the credit of Deputy Commissioner McDonnell and Director Kitchener that it outlines what our waste management system looks like probably better than any plan before it. But the plan does not address at all how diversion is going to be improved, specifically in the area of recycling and even more important in organics. Reciting a litany of numbers of doors knocked, mailers sent, or meetings held is a 30-year-old talking point of the Department of Sanitation. What is needed is an actual plan, a plan that looks at the number of field outreach staff that are needed, the specific plans to go into specific community districts and neighborhoods and conduct building level outreach that is going to address the challenges of multi-unit buildings, to have metrics that can be tracked over time in terms of funding, as you were talking about, as well as staffing capacity. What I have heard today is more of the same, more of ad hoc, vague kind of statements about outreach and education. The stakes could not be higher. Specifically for organics and recycling, we are sending 1.8 million tons of otherwise valuable material to landfilling or disposal. We're paying to do that. We're paying to trash material that we are also paying a lot of money to collect and process. The low-hanging fruit in New York City is recycling and organics, and in no way are organics participation rates currently breaking records or soaring. And as soon as the reduced utility data set for this month is complete, I will be able to evaluate these claims of weekly record breaking and put them in accurate context. This kind of braggadocio in place of actual planning and statistics tracking is not helping anyone. And you do have the capacity within sanitation already. You have highly skilled analytic staff, as well as Director Kitchener and Deputy Commissioner McDonnell, are people that actually care about sustainability. They care about communities. They care about social justice. They are operating, I think, they haven't said anything to me, within constraints from others in the department that are preventing real progressive ideas from actually being implemented. I'll stop there. Well,
If you'd like to add on another 30 seconds, you can.
well, just one factoid. Last year, we sent 275,000 tons of paper, one of the highest value commodities, to landfills or incinerators, despite having long-term contracts and weekly collection routes. And that paper, by the department's own numbers, valued over $3 million in market value. Now I know that that's chump change for the Department of Sanitation, but that amount of chump change was cut for community composting. And that's just but one example of how fiscally wasteful under participation in recycling and organics is, in addition to not being sustainable and leading to the problems that my colleague has talked about, among others.
All right. Hi, my name is Lacey Tauber. I'm the Legislative Director for Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso, former chair of this committee. And I think the best use of time for me right now is just to go through. I've submitted like a draft of what we want to submit to sanitation, but we want to hear more from folks, and I want to thank the council and the SWABs for stepping up where sanitation has failed to make this space for us to hear each other's comments and talk this through. Because we echo your calls for way more engagement But in the meantime, just want to kind of run through our outline and what we're including, and invite folks to reach out if there's things that you think we missed. The first two things are waste equity and commercial waste zones. These are legacy programs for the borough president, and he's obviously extremely invested in their continued success. But as was pointed out, in terms of waste equity, we really need to be sending the commercial waste to the marine transfer stations. We have some concerns about the waste equity impacts of sending a lot of our organics to be processed at Newtown Creek in terms of the amount of trucks it's putting on the road in Community District 1 in Brooklyn. We have a number of other concerns about that we outlined in a report earlier this year, making the case for passing Intro 696 that we will share as an addendum to our comments. And in terms of commercial waste zones, really wanting to see it rolled out more quickly, as has been mentioned many times today, and also encouraging the new administration to look at their the way that the weighting happened in the choices that they made, and make sure that the folks are good actors and that they're being held accountable through this process. The last part is really all about waste diversion and really trying to get to the goal of zero waste to landfills by 2030 that was outlined by the previous administration, enforcement of the CORE Act, containerization that incorporates both organics and recycling, NYCHA, bringing meaningful opportunities for organics diversion to NYCHA, reduction of plastics, building on what they've done at cafeteria culture, C&D waste. Actually put an idea in here I got from you, Justin, about possibly requiring zero waste plans for building. And then finally, of course, supporting community compost. So that's what we've got in here for now. If there's other stuff that you all want to see, please reach out and we'll continue talking. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lacey. Justin?
Thanks for having me, Chair Breu. Thanks. It's been great working with you and and City Council. You guys have really, made so much progress and helped push DSNY on sustainability issues over your chair. So I really appreciate working with you. I wanted to second so much of what's been said by the advocates: ban on incineration, extending the input on the solid waste management plan. Pushing the solid waste management plan to actually commit to the highest sustainability practices, more EPR, which you brought up on a bunch of your questions, and C&D waste, like a focus on C&D waste. What the topic I want to talk about, we'll put more in our testimony, but is particularly what we are doing with the organic waste that we're collecting, the curbside composting. As you know, most of it is going to co-digestion, which is problematic. There are a lot of concerns with the biosolid land application of biosolids from the co-digestion. And if we're not land applying it, the climate accounting sort of tips back towards composting, And so this is what I think part of the climate accounting efforts is to push the co-digestion over composting by doing land application. But land application has a number of concerns. High PFAS, high microplastics, high in hundreds of other chemicals have been poured down drains around the city and flush into the sewer. So we want to ideally continue what New York City has been a leader on, which is local composting. Fresh Kills, DSNY is doing an amazing job at Fresh Kills with composting in Staten Island. All the community composting groups that have been out there modeling hyper-local community-based composting. Our sites that we're about to open in Gowanus, which you asked about, mid-scale site, we're opening up a site in Central Park we'd like to have you come out and look at for helping the park compost their landscaping waste. And so kind of using that approach, I know the SWAB's been working on, you guys have been working on a plan for local composting, in which we'd really like to see the solid waste management plan focus on that, certainly over incineration, but co-digestion is not the best use of our food scraps and something we should really look at. So appreciate that. Thank you.
How's the planning going for the Gowanus site?
So it's a complicated construction project, so it's taken a while for it to happen. some tariff interference too, maybe on the steel, but we're almost ready to open up again, which is exciting.
We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, we'll have you out too.
Thank you.
Great. And Central Park, want to get you out to see that.
I would love to visit Central Park.
Yeah,
Central Park work too.
Yeah.
You got it.
Cool.
Thank you, guys. Next panel, Matthew, Danielle, Mary Ellen, and Susan.
This is on, right? Yeah, okay. I'm Matthew Savello, Chair of the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, and I'd like to thank you, Chair Abreu, for holding this meeting today and giving us this opportunity to speak. Now that the SWABs have time to review the draft 2006 Solid Waste Management Plan, we believe that the gaps we have identified cannot be adequately addressed by middle of January of 2026.
After reviewing past and current swamps, waste characterization studies, and decades of related laws and plans, our preliminary assessment is that the draft lacks the continuity and historical context needed to demonstrate alignment with City Council laws or with prior efforts to increase capture and diversion.
Hello, I'm Mary Ellen Sullivan, and despite nearly 35 years of work, the city has not meaningfully improved recycling outcomes. Research shows that roughly 2/3 of New York City's waste stream is recyclable or compostable through curbside programs that already exist citywide, yet today we're capturing only about half of potential recyclables and just 7% of organics. As a result, more than 1.6 million tons of valuable material are still sent each year to landfill and incinerators, despite weekly collection, processing contracts, and decades of stated policy commitments. At the same time, most of the strategies proposed to reach the swamp's 30.5% diversion rate by 2036, such as textiles, reuse and repair programs, organic pilots, and community composting, are not new. Many date back to the 1980s and 1990s, and only a small number of these laws enacted to support diversion have shown measurable results. DSNY itself acknowledges its limited capacity to enforce many of these requirements.
Good morning, Chair. So my name is Diora St. Hilaire, and I chair the Bronx Solid Waste Advisory Board. So our review also makes it clear that DSNY is not structured to drive sustainability. Its strengths lie in operations collection, routing, personal management, and enforcement, which are critical for implementation, but not for system transformation. I just want to make it very clear that a lot of times, as you've seen, Justin kind of came into the room, the Bronx is often left out of the conversation when we're talking about these diversion numbers and when we're talking about equity. So I think it's important that when we're talking about a plan where actually we have to remind them to include the environmental justice at the end of the slide when they gave it to us, it is important to understand that we have to be working directly with the organizations that are affected by these issues. There isn't a clear plan that says that. So I just want to emphasize that as we are creating spaces for our constituents to weigh in on this plan, that we actually weigh that contribution and know that we have to support a lot of the folks that are affected by it.
Perfect. And hi, Susan Latham. I'm the chair of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. As part of our review, the SWABs hosted public sessions and hearings to hear directly from communities disproportionately affected by New York City's waste exports. We heard compelling testimony about the economic, environmental, and health impacts borne by communities referred to in the draft simply as accessible capacity. New Yorkers deserve a plan that makes clear that most trash is unnecessary, that practical alternatives exist, and that real progress is achievable. For these reasons, the SWABs recommend that at least 6 additional months are needed to adequately assess and respond to this plan. We thank you for the opportunity to testify and look forward to providing further public comment in 2026.
Thank you. We next have Audrey Jenkins to testify.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Audrey Jenkins. I'm a doctoral candidate at the New School, where I research public empowerment and urban social ecological policy. And I'm currently focused on organics management in New York City. I'm testifying today to highlight how valuable the solid waste management plan is for addressing inequities that are growing in our city. Although I'm not here representing my employer, I'm currently a research associate at the Center for New York City Affairs, where our most recent economic and fiscal findings highlight that New York City metro area has the most racially inequitable economy among the top metro city areas in the country. We have the largest gap between white and black unemployment, for example, with black workers experiencing 8.6 unemployment rate as of this current quarter. That rate has increased dramatically. Along with other cities, we've seen a dramatic increase over the past year with federal defunding and economic uncertainties. Designing a waste system that centers equity is critical. This matters both for the distribution of waste impacts and recycling opportunities, but is also important in the distribution of investments. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance has found that per 10,000 tons of organic materials, community composting generates 6.2 jobs compared to only 1 or 2 jobs in industrial organic processing. We know from decades of practice here in New York City that these community composting jobs are quality and impactful jobs. Community composters are community builders. So they are never just collecting, processing, and distributing organics. They are also teachers, social connectors, innovators, environmental stewards, often also directly involved in urban agriculture and local food system sovereignty and resilience, and highly effective promoters of organic waste separation and participation. Additionally, community composting provides a rich set of professional, technical, and social skills building that are particularly accessible to youth workers as they start to enter our workforce, a population that is facing the highest rate of unemployment currently at 11.4%. Hyperlocal, publicly funded community composting, in short, is an incredibly simple way to help address multiple complex city problems, from social isolation to environmental stewardship, while also offering an opportunity to invest directly in our neighborhoods in the form of livable jobs. The solid waste management plan currently highlights the layered economic potentials for textile and other resource recovery streams, but the same should be included for organics. But more critically, the management plan should center economic equity. The plan currently highlights inequities in waste and pollution exposure and the importance of meeting the requirements of the waste equity law. The plan should ensure that neighborhoods with particularly high volatility and sensitivity to political and economic conditions, historically Black and Latinx communities in New York, are able to retain resources like organic materials in their neighborhoods and receive investments for managing those resources for the many economic, social, and ecological benefits that they offer. The city administration currently spends $215 million on exporting organics and $21 million on organic separation and processing. The city council, thankfully, has currently invested a little over $6.25 million for community composting. What is needed is a serious increase in community-based organics management. Because funding has not been intentionally allocated for equity and the most economically impacted communities, the solid waste management plan is an opportunity to take a strong stance in favor of making organics and other waste stream investments equitable by maximizing the use of these raw materials for local community use, including ensuring that land access for processing and good jobs are distributed explicitly in terms of economic equity, and with an intentional effort to promote the multi-impact outcomes of community-based management. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. All right, I believe we have some folks online ready to testify. Okay. Give us 1 second. We're moving on to Zoom testimony shortly. Mary Arnold, are you ready to testify?
You ready to
Yes.
begin?
Yes, I am, sir.
All right, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Brea, for this opportunity to testify. I'm a co-founder and board member of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions, which was founded in Queens in 2009 to advocate for modernization of freight rail in the MTA's right-of-way. Since Harry Zarpansky of DSNY's Bureau of Long-Term Exports set up the city's waste by rail contracts, this new industry has grown exponentially and attracted international investors, notably Macquarie. Today's city and private haulers' waste by rail tonnage comprises more than a third of all rail freight traffic on Long Island. The 2026 draft swamp in this morning's testimony brag about DSNY's waste by rail export, but what are the actual impacts on residents as a result of using rail? First of all, changing export transport modes from truck to rail doesn't do anything to reduce the tonnage or toxicity of waste export or the adverse impacts on residents in communities where waste is hauled, processed, incinerated, and landfilled. As noted by speakers today, the 2026 draft swamp's vague language does not set forth plans to mitigate these problems. Second, while waste by rail does eliminate trucks that export waste from the city, waste is always brought to waste by rail transfer station by trucks. So in every place where there is a waste by rail transfer station, there are diesel trucks coming and going. Also, noisy, high-polluting 1970s locomotives are used to haul waste by rail. In addition, even when rail is used, the last mile also can be by truck, such as at the Reworld Incinerator in Chester, Pennsylvania. Other community burdens include rail cars hauling cans of municipal solid waste that can stink up neighborhoods and attract vectors. Waste characterization studies show that a third of this could be eliminated. It's organics. Rail cars without solid covers on top and with drains in the bottoms of the rail cars are used to haul crushed construction and demolition debris that New York State assumes contains toxics such as asbestos, pesticides, volatile and semi-volatile organic compounds, and heavy metals. There is no reason why the public should continue to be harmed by these uncovered rail cars, since the New York State law went into effect in January 2024 that requires solid covers on rail cars of C and D. However, the industry has decided to fight a modest state law mandating covers in federal court, the Southern District of New York, and Judge Ronnie Abrams says that the trial will take place in 2026. The plan needs to be rewritten to include specific plans and a timetable for increasing the capture and diversion of organics, as well as specific plans to accurately track C&D and recycle it. For example, by diverting gypsum wallboard construction debris from waste by rail to landfill. Thank you so much again. This is a huge plan, and there just hasn't been enough time or engagement allowed. We just are so grateful to the City Council, and please continue this dialogue. in the coming months. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. We're now moving on to Anna Sachs.
You may begin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I would like to echo that I think we need more time for this, specifically to get more people commenting, more people aware that this is even happening. This is going to last for a long time, and so I think it deserves a lot of attention from the public and a lot of public input. Regarding the waste prevention and reuse programs, I feel like they get lost within DSNY. It's not core to their mission, and it feels like there's not enough people devoted to these issues about prevention and reuse, which is the top of the hierarchy. They don't have enough resources, not enough money, and also it doesn't feel like they have enough agency to make the changes that they know are necessary to actually take a meaningful bite out of our waste issues. And then finally, they're subject to budget cuts a lot, again, because I feel like this is not core to DSNY's mission. So I would like to propose that the waste prevention and reuse gets carved out from DSNY. DSNY just focuses on operations, and it becomes its own office or department of circularity, so that it would be people devoted, people with agency, people with budget, and not subject to future budget cuts. So this could work across schools, corporation, residents, and within the government. And it would also shift the language from may or study to actually doing the things that are necessary. So really, I would like to see this its own office, its own department, and not within DSNY. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Claire Mifflin, you're up next.
You may begin.
Hi, thank you, Council Member, and for everything you've done as Chair.
Nice to see you, Claire. Thank you.
I just want to point out that building and infrastructure and the collection methods are critical for diversion, and you need to incentivize the right setup in buildings. Like currently, it's difficult for your underpaid porter to do the right thing. He or she has to store trash just a couple of days, but recycling and organic waste all week. And in a large building, storing that organic waste all week is really tough. There's no financial incentive for building owners. It's not like Local Law 97. And trash-only containerization just continues that disincentivization. Many residents in small buildings, they don't have access to recycling organics bins. Maybe there's a trash bin on the sidewalk. So you could fix that through shared on-street containers for trash recycling and organics and getting bins off the sidewalks. I really think what needs to be done is kind of piloting solutions that really work for buildings in a neighborhood, and like Samantha said, go in with a lot of engagement, pilot better incentives and infrastructure, and see if you can get like way above the 50% capture rates. How high can you get? And then roll it out further. I think there needs to be this kind of system-wide approach. I also would like to see financial support for parks and nature who have a lot of yard waste, to work with community composters, to compost on site, and then use it to improve stormwater management and talk with DEP about how it can be part of stormwater goals. I'd like to see baseline and increased support for community composting within DSNY's budget. Even though it's great you've been doing it, it shouldn't be something that has to be rethought every year. I'd like to see for food scraps them target large generators first. Like when McDonald's or Hunts Point Produce Market don't separate food scraps, should we be fining a little mom and pop for not doing it? Let's make the big generators do it first. Commercial waste zoning has reverse incentives. From the hauler point of view, they got to charge less for compostables, but it costs them more. So they don't help the businesses separate. That needs to be fixed. And also the businesses have to have a container. They often can't fit it inside, so they have a trash bin on the street. They don't want to have an organics bin as well. So that disincentivizes them. So commercial waste owner it's not surprising that it didn't increase the diversion rates in Queens, because there's these disincentivizing happening. I think waste prevention and reuse is great, but there needs to be a lot of collaboration. What if libraries could share way more than books? Collaboration with DOE, there's got to be a lot of collaboration with other entities in the city. C&D waste as well. I think You know, they need to have more RCI certified C&D facilities and a requirement for them to be used for city projects. Those are facilities that actually
Thank you. Time expired.
Claire, you can
Thank you
finish.
so much.
You can add if you need to, Claire.
That's all. And then the data, I fully support Samantha's. We need data. We need to have proper evaluation of the pilots, like the containerization pilot. Beyond reduced 311 rat data, I haven't heard any real evaluation. If we're going to do pilots, let's evaluate them fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. You raised great ideas. Next, we have Christopher Leon Johnson.
You may begin.
Yeah, hello. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. Thank you, Sean, for having this hearing. Don't worry about anything, man. Like, you're gonna be still the chair in the committee next year. You're voting for Julie Menon to be speaker. Like, she's not gonna remove you as chair, so there's nothing to worry about you being removed as chair for the next term. But I want to make this clear that the city council needs to make it where that more. I know that the city council allocated $5 million into the BIDs for the containerization program because I think they were scared of a lawsuit or them losing votes. But I hope in 2026 for the FY27 budget that this keep on going on where that the city council allocates more money, millions of dollars into the containerization program because, like I said many times, I say it till I die, that the containerization program is an unfair program, and why that you have to have like one company, you have to buy one container. I think that the city, I know we can't change what's going on with the containerization where but these BIDs, the BIDs need a lot of help. But I hope that very soon, the people that make low income get the same amount of help too when it comes to the program and with the city council. I think that the city council needs to make it where that if a person makes a certain amount of money per year, they're able to get a free bin through the help of the city council. They get vouchers and stuff like that through the city council. And so that's all I gotta say. I gotta go to an event, so I gotta get on the train. But thank you, Sean. You did a great job as the chair for the past 4 years. And you'll keep your term, you'll get another term. So take care, brother. Enjoy.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Johnson. I know you're sometimes a lot busier than all of us. You're always everywhere. Take care.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.
You got it. So now we're going to just wait for the kids to testify. They're ready. All right. And these are the students of cafeteria culture? Yes. Okay, look at this. Well, I'm excited for you guys. Let's see, how many of you do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Give them 30 minutes, sir. You may start whenever you're ready, okay? We're all hearing you and paying attention.
You guys may begin.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Abreu and the Sanitation Committee for giving us this chance to speak today. We are 5th graders from PSMS 46 in Harlem. The 10-year solid waste management plan is very important to us because in 10 years we'll be adults. We'll be responsible for the problems that are being created now. We live in an environmental justice zone in Harlem with a lot of truck traffic. Garbage trucks come through our neighborhood on its way to incinerators and landfills. Cafeteria culture taught us that there is no way for our trash.
Wow.
We learned that when our trash leaves our homes or our school, it goes to a nearby waste transfer station. Then to Staten Island, then Newark, New Jersey. Then finally, it goes on a train to Niagara or Delaware to burn in an incinerator. The leftover ashes go to a final landfill somewhere else. All of that transportation creates pollution, and the incinerators create pollution, and the landfills make greenhouse gases. This hurts the planet and people who live nearby. 1 in 4 kids has asthma in Newark or New Jersey because of the incinerators there. Kids just like us get asthma for life because of something out of their control. This cannot go for another 10 years. We have to disrupt this harmful system. The other option option we have is the brown bin, which is better than the trash bins. But there still are many checks taking the food waste to a lot of places. And we don't even have brown bins at Knight's houses. With cafeteria culture and compost power, we take our food waste out of this system and we compost it locally. At Knight's Polo Grounds is less than 1 block away and no trucks! Compost power at Polo Grounds makes compost out of our food scraps. And they hire our neighbors to work there. And we think everybody should be able to compost their food scraps in their communities too. The solid waste management plan needs to include local composting across New York City to make healthy soil, to grow food, and cut down on all pollution for all communities. Thank you for listening!
Wow, let's give them a round of applause. Well, listen, you guys should be very, very proud of yourselves. Are you ready to take my job? You ready to be the next council member? I think you guys are ready. And look, this is why we invest in cafeteria culture. I remember when we were fighting to expand the composting initiative, Eric Goldstein and Anna Sachs approached us and said, you know what, cafeteria culture, let's put them as part of the initiative. And we spent $500,000 in making sure that we're educating our young people. And boy, I think you know more about composting than I do at this point. And so this is an example of why it's so important that the city needs to keep investing in our kids. And I'm very proud of you all. I hope to meet you all one day. I would love to visit your class. And so we'll set that up with Rhonda, okay? Thank you, everybody. Now go back to class, okay? Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye. This is by far my favorite hearing I've ever had, just seeing those kids. It really made me melt. Thank you. And with that, we have adjourned today's hearing. Thank you all so much for coming.